BMAX audio adventure. It's BJJ365. Hey, I don't know if you guys heard, but we're sponsored by Toehold. Follow Toehold on Instagram, TOE_HOLD. Screenshot this podcast, tag me, tag Toehold, share it in your Instagram stories. And when you do that, we're going to enter you in the drawing for a free pair of flip-flops. We've already had one winner. These are some dope flip-flops, guys. Personalized, custom, Brazilian, leather. They're awesome. I've got 2 pairs. I'm wearing one right now. Do yourself a favor. Pick some up. Even if you don't win the prize, if you'll DM him and tell him that you heard about it right here on the podcast, you'll get a discount. I think it's like 10%, something like that. I don't know for sure. Okay, so here's what I want to do today. I want to read you an essay. I know that sounds terrible, right? It's actually a blog post. It's by a guy named John Brashear. Now, I don't know this guy. I just came across this. I think I saw it on Reddit, on RBJJ. I don't remember exactly where I saw it, but I really like this. And this kind of echoes some of the stuff that I talk about a lot on this podcast and that I'm trying to implement in my own jiu-jitsu. So I want you guys to listen to it, and I'm really anxious to hear your thoughts about it. We'll keep it brief. Here it goes. This is called The Pride of Experience and Why It Can Make You Worse at Jiu-Jitsu. When I was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, I was submitted by a white belt who was inside my closed guard. I had probably been training for a little over 2 years at that point. I was relatively new blue belt, but I still felt like I was starting to get the hang of things. I didn't usually get caught by the white belts at our gym, and I was one of very few students outside of our instructor who had any color in their belt at all. This white belt was a mid-30s ex-collegiate football player. He wasn't super athletic. Side note, that sounds crazy if he played college football. John Brashear, I bet he was pretty athletic. Back to his essay. But he was pretty strong, and he learned things quickly. So we wound up in some scramble where I was kind of in turtle, but he was in front of me, and he grabbed a cross lapel grip and started trying to choke me. I know, I thought, I'll sit through to the guard, and there's no way he'll choke me from there. I had been taught that it was extremely difficult to the point of not being worth trying to submit someone from their closed guard. The white belt was not aware of this rule. So I sat through, expecting the choke to loosen or for me to easily break it off. That did not happen. The choke got tighter. I railed against it, flailing my legs, trying to get them on his hips so I could push off and break the grip. But every time I hipped out to make space, he inched a little bit closer. I probably fought it off for 10, 15 seconds. Enough time for the room to start going black, but I eventually tapped. Afterwards, I had a pretty awkward exchange where I tried to tell him that he shouldn't usually expect to get the choke inside his opponent's guard, and he nodded along. And I might be right that it's inconsistent or risky, but what's undeniable is that it worked to get the tap that time. So what happened here? I was the more experienced grappler, and I knew that choking someone inside their guard is usually taught to be impractically risky and low percentage. So I made a move based on that general assumption, ignoring the unique factors of this situation. His grip was already pretty deep. He was pretty short and stocky, so extending a way to break the grip would not be trivial, etc. I made a decision based on a commonly taught general rule without any regard for the current reality. The white belt had no such constraint. What was generally taught was irrelevant to him. He only saw a deep choking grip that he had right now, and he had no intention of letting it go. So whose jiu-jitsu was more effective in that moment? Because he had no preconceived notions of correct form, he was better able to seize the opportunity in that instance. As we accumulate experience in jiu-jitsu, we begin to internalize rules for what is correct based on things that we see and are taught. We notice that we have a hard time finishing kimuras on people stronger than us, and we assume that the technique inherently requires a strength advantage. We're told to never slide pass without the underhook, and we assume that's the only correct way to do it. We internalize these assumptions as being all-encompassing, when they may be incorrect or only correct in a limited sense. We can begin to close off our minds to alternative ways of doing things because we think we've seen enough to know the best way. I often notice that beginners are tougher roles during their first few classes than they are during the months that follow. Why? Because they have an open mind to all possible ways of getting it done. They don't have any preconceived notions as to what is correct, so they only go with what seems right and feels right in the moment. Are they often wrong about what is right? Yes. But this use of their primal instincts is more dangerous than their first attempts at doing things the right way. Of course, their ability will eventually go above what they were initially capable of, as they do begin to master tried and true ways of doing things. But I think in this initial acquiescing to the established norm can rob us of our exploratory spirit. That was a lot of big words for me to say right there. Acquiescing, exploratory. I'm from Lawrence County. I feel pretty proud of myself right there. Onward, we begin to only look towards other people to tell us the best way to do things, rather than just take an honest look at what's working and what's not and basing our decisions on that. Obviously, there's benefit in learning from what others have already figured out. If we had to figure out everything from trial and error, then learning jiu-jitsu would be an unbearable grind. It's important that we have teachers to show us the fundamentals and give us guiding principles, but it is dangerous to become dogmatic. Once we start thinking it's all been figured out, we become stagnant. And that's when we are at our most vulnerable. Someone with the spirit of experimentation will eventually find a way around the ironclad rules that we've established in our head, and we'll be taken by surprise. This is why it is important to stay humble and to constantly seek to improve. We can't assume that we've already figured out the best way to do something just because we've been at it for a while, and we have to keep testing what we think we know against what's actually going on. We can always find a new situation where the best answer is difficult to determine, and we can refine old techniques to work in the context of new situations. But only if we avoid rigidity in our thinking and maintain intellectual fluidity to adapt and modify our understanding of techniques and their place in the bigger picture. As martial artists, the pursuit of perfection is a never-ending process. I loved that. John Brashear, great job. I couldn't agree more. I am a firm believer in thinking outside the box. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I believe there's a box at all. I was talking to the guys in Huntsville at our Huntsville location last night, 10th Planet, Jiu-Jitsu, Huntsville, Alabama, and we were talking about the matrix, about how once you reach, like if you'll allow yourself to think independently and to experiment and to have failure be an important part of your training, that eventually you start to see that there's no such thing as right and wrong at all. There's no such thing as always and never. In fact, sometimes always can be never, or up can be down, left can be right. Never knee slice without an underhook becomes always knee slice. Like what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you should always knee slice without an underhook. What I'm saying is that there are no rules. We learn rules as guidelines for when we're adolescents, for when we're young. I use this analogy a lot with my students. So, when my daughter was a young lady, a very small child, and she first started walking, all right, sweetheart, now come on over here and let's go to the mailbox. Now listen, when we cross the road, we always hold Daddy's hand, don't we? Yes, Daddy, we always hold Daddy's hand. And we always look this way, don't we, sweetheart? We do, Daddy. And we always look this way. And now when we cross the road, we always listen to see if a car's coming this way, and we listen this way, and then we look again. Daddy, we always do that. And don't we always hold Daddy's hand? Yes, Daddy, we always do that. And so then we cross the street, and then we cross back. But then when she gets to be 5, 6 years old, we walk out there to the side of the road, and we do it together, but maybe we don't hold hands. All right, sweetheart, we're not holding hands anymore, but look this way. We always look when we cross. Daddy, we always do. And we always look, that's right. And then we cross. Well, now she's 10. Now I can send her to the mailbox. I don't have to walk with her anymore, much less hold her hand. But if that was a rule, if that was true at one time, why isn't it true anymore? Because we outgrow the rules, right? And that's a very simple example. You know, regardless of what you think about the Bible, there's some great lessons in it. And one of them is found in the book of Hebrews, where the author talks about eating meat or drinking milk. And he's talking about like the deep, like the hard to digest parts of the scriptures, right? Like that milk is for babies. You don't feed steak to a baby. Babies can't process steak. It doesn't mean you never get to eat steak, and it doesn't mean that one day you won't prefer steak. You may not even want milk when you get older. But if you try to feed steak to a baby, they can't process it. They can't deal with it. They can't chew it up. They barely even know to put it in their mouth. Steak is not for babies. Once we mature, we move on to the heavier, harder to process things. And that's what rules are for. They are guidelines to get us thinking in a correct way so we don't cross the street and get smacked by a car when we're still new. BMAX Audio Adventure. This is BJJ365. Don't forget to check out my website. You can already checking out the podcast, but check out my website. It's www.brandonmc.ninja. All of my thoughts, my philosophies, my seminars, my techniques and videos, my classes here, they're all up there, and it's $5 a month if you pay for the whole year up front, or $10 a month if you just want to go month to month. That's a pretty good deal, because I got to be honest, it's a pretty good website. You're going to like it a lot. We've got a lot of members, and we've gotten a lot off of this podcast, and so I thank you guys so much for doing that. Also, I'm trying to get into the t-shirt game. Go to www.10p4l, the number 4.com. And I've got that I Love Violence shirt. I got a couple of different designs. I got this awesome designer working with me. She's killing it. And we got a lot of cool stuff up there. So you guys check it out. Don't forget about Toehold. Screenshot this and share it on your Instagram. Love y'all. Thank you so much for your support.